Yeah, I wish I could tell you right now without going back and watching the film. We had a pretty good flow going. Wanted to be able to run it out there. We broke some good runs, and but I know if you get a TFL or you get a no gain, and then you have an incompletion, and now you're 3rd and 10, and you don't. I mean, it's one thing to try to want to continue to get first downs, but if you can't even get in position to go for it and get first downs, that's tough, man. And we ended up in that boat about 3 different times, so that's hard. But like I say, we'll watch the film and we'll clean this stuff up, and we're going to have to. I mean, Tampa Bay's coming in; they're a good football team, so we're going to have to be ready. I mean, they're all good, and it's not going to get any easier. These only get harder and harder as you go, and they're more meaningful every game that we go. But, I go back to this. Maybe we needed this. Maybe we needed to get kicked around a little bit, because that's what happened.
Man, can you look at that face right there? Look at that face right there. Do you want to be in a Dan Campbell-led practice this week getting ready for Tampa Bay? Look at that face. Does that look like he's going to go into practice this week and say, "Okay, boys, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay"? No, Dan Campbell, he's going to have these guys fired up for Tampa Bay right there. That does not look like a guy that's going to mess around in practice this week. So that's one thing I do appreciate about Dan Campbell is that he's going to have them ready. The Lions haven't lost 2 games in a row since 2022, and this is going to be probably the toughest test for a week after a loss that we've had. So I like that stat that we come back, but Tampa Bay is a good-ass team, and we're going to have to bring it to beat them. Johnny Gaz is in the house, man. It is so good to see you on here. He says if Amon-Ra makes that 4th down catch and we don't commit the roughing the passer call, the Lions could have overcome all the other stuff. Frustrating either way. And I wanted to address that specifically right there because I don't know if Dan's going to bring it up in this little presser right here. That roughing the passer call, I want to know how you guys feel about that roughing the passer call. That they called it right there in that moment. And he did put his hands on him, but this wasn't like, I mean, Aiden could have destroyed Patrick Mahomes right there, and he let up, and Patrick Mahomes did a little bit of a sell job on that, and I didn't like the call, man. I'm 50 years old, man. I grew up watching Lawrence Taylor, Ray Lewis. I mean, these guys will bite their finger off, and we have an old school kind of team, and I hate soft ass shit. I hate it.
You've had enough of that shit.
I'm not going to complain about the call because, underneath of the law, the law, he hit him late, or roughing the passer. But I hate it because you could have not called that too. You had a choice. It wasn't egregious. But this is where we've came. But nice for your comment in there. Do you agree with John Dorn? Do you agree that was an egregious hit, or do you think that football has become soft and that we should let these guys play football? I want to see a physical football game. And you have 2 different kind of games that are called in the NFL. And 2 weeks ago, the Lions were able to go to Baltimore, and those referees called it differently. And I'm not saying that this was called bad. You can call that a dirty hit. That was this type of game. But I like the type of games that are called where they do let them put their hands on each other a little bit when they're playing tough and physical football. I like those type of games better. I want to be physical. That plays into the type of and the brand of football that we have. And it was, but the thing is like, as a player, you have to be able to recognize what type of game is being called. It's a lot like umpires in baseball. You know, sometimes they're giving you that outside corner, sometimes they're not. You know what I'm saying? You know, and you got to realize how they're calling it. And you need to adjust your game to as such within the game. That is not the referee's fault. That's the Lions' fault. That's the Lions' fault for not recognizing that. You know, I hate the fact that they called that play on Hutchinson, but Hutchinson's got to be smarter than that. Hutchinson's got to be smarter than that. He needs to realize that that's the type of game that they're calling. And they need to adjust their game as such. Oh, wow. Really? You're going to call Branch a crybaby. Okay. Let's hit this up real quick right here. First of all, Brian Branch, this is inexcusable for you. You got to keep your poise, and you need to do better in that. You don't need to act like a child. But you calling him a baby when you had your linebacker Quay Walker crying like a little girl that got her favorite little pink bike taken away in there. And Brian Branch, I don't condone what you did, but he went and slapped Juju in the face and then judo slammed him. I don't necessarily call that crying. I call that a outburst of alpha aggression, which is uncalled for. But calling him a crybaby when you have the biggest crybaby that's ever cried on camera before, going down in the tunnel. I mean, if you want to call crying, you know, using a belly-to-belly suplex. Wow. That's rich. Anyway, that's inexcusable. You can't act like that. You can't act like that. And I'm glad that Dan Campbell called that out. You know, all kidding aside, Doctor of Thugonomics, all kidding aside, you can't do that. That, no matter what it is, he didn't go cry in a tunnel, but that is a soft mentality to go and start a fight on the field. John, you are rich, man. You know, John is exposing himself because everybody that watches this show knows that John hasn't been seen since the last time the Packers won on this show. He only comes on when they win. John is pretty much the softest Packer fan that there is out there. At least Steve comes out here every day. But John, you're the softest Packer fan ever. You only come out when your team wins or when the Lions lose. And then he comes in and says, "Fool's gold Lions." But you didn't even show up the week after you lost to the Browns. Your team lost to the Browns. I can respond to anything that you say as a Packer fan to your team lost to Joe Flacco. That's all that really needs to be said right there. But anyway, let's get back in to see what Dan's got to say, because it's definitely better than anything that I'm saying.